It's interesting to me that you as a group have identified the things that we have discovered statistically are the variables that are some of the most difficult for companies. You mentioned time, Kate. One of the things that we find that really holds companies back is that they have not made a commitment to X% of time be spent on the business as opposed to in the business, or X% of time per week, per month, what have you. Does your executive leadership time commit 25% of its time, let's say, to thinking about the future as opposed to today, and allow for today to be more delegated through the organization? But it's just whether, no matter what that percentage of time is that's right for your organization, picking that percentage and sticking with it is something that I have found has really been a valuable resource or tool for strategic leaders. The other thing that a couple of you hit on is I found an HBR study that said that once you do develop a plan, once you have those items that you really think that you can win with, about 2/3 of the value is actually realized out of that. And where does it go? And what they said is the number one place where we fall off our numbers is improper resource allocation. We don't give it enough resource because it's so hard to take resources away from something else to give it to the new ideas. And the other thing I think is something you brought up, Vic, is communication. You know, we in the executive room may know what we want to have done, but our employees don't all know what we want to have done. And there just is no such thing as over communication.
Well, you just can't. It's nice if a bunch of smart guys get around a room, pick some really smart, complicated things to do that they're just sure is going to vault the business to the top. And that just isn't what people can comprehend quickly. And we just don't have enough time. I think I'm speaking for all of us, we just don't have enough time for complicated initiatives. It has to be very simple. And the goal has to be simple. And the goal has to come out of my brain, through my mouth, through thin air, into somebody else's ears and into their brain. The picture's got to be the same. And so you just can't get too fancy. And that's why 10 out of the 12 things we throw on the wall don't stick. Because it seems like the simplest stuff is really the best stuff. And that's the easiest to communicate. And it just works the best. It must be simple. It must be easily understood so that the goal and the picture is clear.
Going back to what Margaret said, I think your systems and processes have to be aligned. I mean, it's one thing to communicate it to your team. This is where we're going. This is what we're going to do.
Right.
But if my reward system, if my reward system detracts from them allocating the time toward that effort, or if some other system hinders them from doing the things that we want them to do, in that regard, we need to modify the system to make sure those systems are aligned. Otherwise, you won't get the behaviors that you want.
The alignment in our system, I don't know who else in our system calls it this, but I call it just keeping the wagon on the road. And we worry a lot about alignment with suppliers. I mean, we are in the inventory conversion business, and then sale. So we have to stay aligned with our suppliers, and departments have to stay aligned. Staying aligned is huge. It's akin to staying on the road, staying on the straight road. Because if we don't stay aligned, you know, you go through the ditch. When you get off the road, then you're out in the field wandering around. And then to get back on the alignment, you have to go back through the ditch, back onto the road. So it's always worse when you get off, and it's always worse right before you get back on. And that's a tough thing for us to go through. I mean, I don't know, that's kind of a country view of that. But so staying on the road is the key, and balancing the time you work on the business is the discipline it takes to pick a few things and that'll really make a difference.
Well, I think Ron had a really good point, because one of the issues, and I think, Vic, you were alluding to it, is how do you get that alignment when we put a lot of jargon up on the wall, you know, all that fancy language that we tend to like to use, you know, just to show how smart we are. People don't really know what that means to them, you know, 3 layers down. And what we tend to find is really effective is storytelling. And you were alluding to that, because when you tell a story, people all have, you know, they can visualize it the same. It's kind of like reading the same book. You may pick up different gems, but at least you have the same picture in your mind. And I know you do a lot of storytelling.
And I think it's really important, because if you start, we started a bank from scratch 3 years ago in the start of the worst recession we've had in economic times. We just had to remind people, our objective today was to get the bank open. Don't worry about it. You got so many things to do, but if you make it simple and you talk about that all the time, we celebrate every little success, tell stories every week. I came in every day when I would go get coffee. Well, the folks, I didn't set up a meeting, but everybody kind of gathered around. Ron, what are you doing today? Where do I need to be? What do I need to be doing? You kind of direct things. That evolved into now, 3 years later, and we've been doing it since that time, a family gathering. And that's where you tell stories. It's a place where people get information and you weave in and begin to develop a personality, which becomes the culture. And I reminded people it's kind of hard to have a culture when you're really early in this, but you can have a personality that evolves to a great culture, and it's about attitude. So if people feel like these things aren't too complex, doesn't matter how hard it gets, they look at that leader to see how they're reacting.
This is, this is something I can get.
Yeah,
I can
I can do
understand.
it.
Now I've got to find out how to do it, and then the reward and the accountability and all that comes later. But the goal is, getting the goal is huge, but the part of the alignment is how do we get the goal accomplished? I mean, the how to. So that's like, I would concur with your statement a few minutes ago. We make a lot of goals and a lot of great things to do, but if people don't understand how to, and part of understanding how to is understanding what I mean by when I say how to, and what I even mean by the goal. So if it isn't communicated, if the how to falls apart, or there's no accountability, there's no follow-up, you suddenly have goals. Well, we made that goal a year ago, but nothing's really happened, and
I tell
really
people
gets
part of
stale.
my job is try to remove barriers.
Remove barriers.
Right. That's
I feel like part of my job is to be a
Total.
cheerleader and a coach and a supporter and try to remove barriers.
yes, that's
So they may
exactly.
not have all the plans laid out, and so they may hit a barrier and say, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. And
People have to get excited about where you want to go, and they buy into that. And once they do that, then they're able to pick the important things and set some priorities, and you're not having, and you're removing things that keep them from being successful.